Salvete discipuli. This lesson is all about relative pronouns and their clauses. So, relative pronoun rules. A relative pronoun is showing a relationship to another noun in the sentence. I purposely use the word relationship so that you can, hopefully it'll help you remember the purpose of a relative pronoun. Relative pronouns will match its antecedent in gender and number, not necessarily case. And that's because a relative pronoun has its own function within its own clause. I know that sounds very obscure right now. It'll make a lot more sense when we look at some examples. The case functions of relative pronouns are exactly the same as those of nouns that we've already learned. The relative pronoun begins the clause, the verb ends the clause. This is super important to remember. It'll help you a ton. All right, I tried to come up with some examples in English. They're a little clunky, but hopefully it helps. So the nominative is the subject or the subject complement. So for example, in this sentence, the relative clause is isolated by commas. The kid is best is the main sentence. That's the main clause. Who has a hat is the relative clause. And in this example of a relative clause, who is the subject? Who is doing the verb? Has is the verb. Hat is the direct object. So the kid who has a hat is best. The who here is giving you more information about this noun over here. So the kid is the antecedent. All right, now we're going to switch it up a bit and make it the indirect object. So the kid to whom I gave a hat is best. Notice here that I is the subject, gave is the verb, hat is the direct object, to whom is the indirect object. Now with as a direct object use, the kid whom the hat covers is best. Whom the hat covers is our relative clause. The hat is the subject, covers is the verb, whom is what's being covered. I know that the whoms here sound funky. That's because most people don't use them in English anymore, but this is the proper use of whom. Who is pretty much only used in the subject in English. All right, the kid on whom, so this is a prepositional phrase, the hat rests is best. Hat is the subject, rest is the verb, on whom is a prep phrase. All right, this is the chart. It's taken directly off of your charts that I gave you. The boxes won't connect over here, but cui is only mentioned here because it's the same for the dative and the so same for the masculine and the neuter in the dative. Same with quibus over here. It's quibus all the way across. It's quibus all the way across. If you're used to doing your charts vertically, you can continue to do that vertically. I know that a lot of you are going to ask me if you need to memorize these. Of course, the answer is yes, but notice that there are many similarities in things that we're used to. Okay, we've got em here for the accusative, am for the accusative, o, accented o and accented a, accented o for the ablatives. We've got os here for the accusative plural in the masculine. We're used to that. As for the accusative plural in the feminine. An accented I up here for the masculine nominative plural, and our neuter rules mostly work out. The nominative and the accusative is exactly the same. So we've got quad and we've got quad. Over here it's qui and it's qui. Now this can be a little confusing because quad can also mean because. We will talk about how to isolate that. And over here, quam can also mean than. It can mean other things. I think it'll be pretty obvious too if you're looking at quad as because versus quad as a relative pronoun. Okay, let's look at some examples. Pause the video quickly and copy down these 3 sentences. All right, and now go back and put the brackets around the relative clauses. Remember, one of our rules was the relative pronoun begins the relative clause, the verb ends the clause. So for the first one, you should have the relative clause bracketed out as qui sceptrum tenebat. And so now that we have that isolated, we can see that our main sentence is senex erat rex cogidubinus. Qui sceptrum tenebat is our relative clause. Now we can go through and label everything. Senex is nominative, therefore it's our subject. Qui, according to our charts, is also nominative. This is the subject of the relative clause. Its antecedent, the person that it's referring to, is senex. Both of these are masculine and nominative. They also happen to be singular. Okay, skeptrum is our direct object because it's accusative. Tenebat is our verb. Erat is a linking verb. Rex cogitabunis, both of these words are subject complements. They're both nominative. So this would read, the old man who was holding the scepter was King Cogitabunis. All right, for this one, the relative clause was quem through ducabat. Remember, the relative pronoun starts it, the verb ends it. So go ahead and label it. We've got Agnes, nominative, therefore the subject. Quem, em, that is your masculine accusative singular in the in your charts. That's our direct object. Servus is nominative, so it's your subject. We've got your verb. We have a linking verb. Sorry, I didn't put an L there. And victima, that's nominative, so it's our subject complement. All right, so this would read, the main clause would read, the lamb was the victim. The more information is whom the slave was leading. So the lamb, we could say which if you want because it's an animal. The lamb which the slave was leading was the victim. All right, next sentence, you should have it bracketed off between quod and delectavit. Remember we talked about quod also meaning because. It simply doesn't make sense here for it to be because. Also, it's isolated by commas, and it has another verb in it. Those are all clues that you are actually looking at a relative clause. All right, so now we can go ahead and label it. Donum, I know you see the you want to think that it's accusative, but donum is a neuter noun, and furthermore, our verb here is a linking verb. It's not, there's no action verb in the main clause, so on the outside of the brackets. So this cannot be a direct object. There is no verb for it to be receiving the action of. All right, so the gift is the subject. Quod, this is a neuter relative pronoun. It could be nominative or accusative. However, regem right here has to be accusative. So it is our direct object. By default, this is our subject. Maxime is an adverb. Delectavit is a verb. Erat's a linking verb. Equus is a nominative, and it's on the other side of a linking verb, therefore it's a subject complement. All right, so the gift, which pleased the king greatly, was a horse. So the gift was a horse. That's the main sentence. That can stand on its own. Which pleased the king greatly cannot stand on its own. That's why it's a relative clause. It's a dependent clause. All right, go ahead and pause it and copy these down. So the first one, I did a couple of things. I first of all marked off the relative clause. It goes from quod to farabont. I also marked off a prep phrase, which we talked about in a previous lesson. This adjective right here is underlined, and now I'm going to go ahead and mark it. All right, so venum, it's a neuter noun. It has to be nominative because there is a linking verb. There's no action verb here for it to be receiving the action of, and we don't have another stated subject. Aurea is modifying patera, and so that's why it is included in this prep phrase here. All right, quod. Quod is neuter. It can be nominative or accusative. The reason why I know that it is accusative and therefore the direct object is because the verb here is plural. Okay, in order for you can check your charts, quod is on the singular side, so this cannot be the subject. Plus, we have onculi here. AE can be nominative plural, so the slave girls are the subject. This is our verb. Then we have a linking verb here. All right, so the main clause of the sentence reads, the wine was in the golden bowl. And then we add our relative clause, which means which the slave girls were carrying. So the wine, which the slave girls were carrying, was in the bowl. All right, next sentence. The relative clause starts it, the verb ends it. So quae coronam gerabat is our relative clause. And now that we have that bracketed off, we can mark everything. So femina is the subject, it's nominative. Erat is our linking verb. Therefore, regina, which is also nominative, is a subject complement. The main clause reads, the woman was queen. Now let's look at our relative clause. Quai can be a couple of different things. So let's look at the verb here. The verb is singular, so this would make sense as a feminine neuter singular subject. Pronoun has to be a direct object, which also makes this the subject. So the relative clause will read, who was wearing a crown. So the whole thing together would be the woman who was wearing a crown was queen. All right, last sentence. You would bracket it off this way, beginning with quam, the relative pronoun, ending with the verb. And now we can go ahead and mark it. So victima is a nominative, so it's our subject. Belawit is the verb, so the victim bleated. Bleated as in like not bled, like you have blood coming out, but as the sound that a goat makes, bleat. All right, so the victim bleated. Quam is feminine accusative singular, so this is our direct object. Serwis is nominative singular. That's our, that should read subject. Sorry about that. And tenabat is our verb. So the relative clause would read which the slave was holding. So the victim, which the slave was holding, bleated. So remember, a relative pronoun is showing a relationship to another noun in the sentence. It will match its antecedent in case and number, but it has its own function in the relative clause. It uses the same functions as nouns. It begins the clause, the verb ends the clause. Wale te discipuli.